Bubbles. You know you love them, and many an occasion in life is marked by popping bottles. They're also quite often used in champagne cocktails, and actually the idea for this episode sort of struck me while I was making a Death in the Afternoon video, which you can watch here if absinthe and bubbles sounds like a good time to you. But do you really have to use champagne, or like will Prosecco suffice, and then what the hell is a Pet Nat? So here to answer all of our questions is the effervescent Brodie Comer, and I might even be lucky enough to get her to make me a cocktail later, so stay tuned. Brodie is a sommelier and a winemaker, as well as a fellow committed hedonist, so I couldn't really think of anyone better to guide us through this carbonated minefield. So thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. So I guess to get started, what glass should we be drinking out of? We've got a few different options here. Does it matter?
There are a few things that you should look for if you want the ideal champagne glass. What you really want is a glass with quite a wide bulb at the bottom. Having a wider bulb at the bottom means that it releases a lot more aromas from the wine, and you want something with a more narrow rim, so something sort of like this glass really, with a nice narrow rim like this, and that will capture all the bubbles into the glass. You can kind of just use whatever you want at the end of the day.
I always, this is my favourite one because it's got a little hollow stem and you see all the bubbles. So even though I know it's like technically not as good because I think the bubbles disperse like more quickly, it just makes me feel really glamorous. So,
well, at the end of the day, it's meant to be fun, isn't it?
Yeah. All right. So you go this one and I'll go this one. And I guess the first question is, what makes champagne so special?
I guess the thing that makes champagne so special is that champagne is obviously from the region of Champagne, and it's got really amazing soils, it's got really chalky soils, it's really cool climate, so you get really amazing, really bright acidity, very mineral wines that you don't really get from other sparkling wines around the world. So that's what's really special about champagne. But there's still heaps of amazing alternatives to champagne that are being made in plenty of other places around the world now.
Well, yeah, so I mean, obviously we're going to have to drink champagne.
Oh,
we're doing this for you guys. It's definitely not us that are enjoying it today. But I guess just to have a little taste to see if I can find these minerals that you're talking of. But then I guess my next question is, are there other ones which are maybe a bit cheaper but get similar sort of vibe?
Yeah. These two are really good examples of that. So there are other places in the world that make champagne
Such
method
a good
sparkling.
sound.
Yeah, that's great. So there's places like in Spain, in Penedes, where they make cava, which is made in the same way as champagne. So it goes through two fermentations, one outside of the bottle and a second fermentation in the bottle, which is where you get all those lovely bubbles. And they're aged on the lees, which is what they do in champagne. So you get a nice kind of toastiness and brioche, yummy characters like that. So cava is made in Spain from local varieties, from Churello, Macabeo, and we've got here another alternative, which is from the Loire Valley. So this is made from Chenin Blanc, which is a local variety to the Loire Valley, and it's made in the same way. So the same as champagne, the primary fermentation and then a second one in the bottle and aging on the lees.
Yeah, so that's where you get all that texture and complexity.
Yeah, yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Because yeah, you do get that real kind of like bready, yeasty note that like is just so different from other sparkling wines. Like that's to me kind of how I always know if it's champagne,
Absolutely,
you know?
yeah. And that's all from the yeast autolysis. So what happens with the yeast inside the bottle is they actually die, and then they give off all these amazing aromas of like baked bread and brioche.
So they kind of sacrifice themselves for us.
100%.
But I do always, I've said this before on here that cava, obviously Bomba, where I work, is a Spanish restaurant, so we serve a lot of cava, and people can be a bit distrusting of it, I think, because there was a lot of like not very good cava flooded the market for a while, but actually well-made, you know, good quality cava is such good value for money. Again, like, yeah, very complex and heaps going on to think about and everything, but generally like a third of the price of even another French sparkling quite often.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a good little hack, that one. Now, the other one that we see all the time and, you know, that people are most familiar with and is used a lot in cocktails and things is Prosecco. And that one's a bit different, right?
It is, yeah. So Prosecco originally comes from the Veneto region of Italy. It's made from a grape variety called Glera. and it's made a bit differently from champagne. It doesn't go through 2 fermentations, it just goes through 1 fermentation, and instead of the bubbles coming from being fermented in the bottle and trapping the CO2, it's actually carbonated in a tank. So it's not as, I guess, high quality, and you don't get all those lovely toasty characters because it's not aged on the lees like champagne method sparkling is.
Yeah.
But it's a really fun sparkling wine to have if you want something that's a little bit more fruity and not as sort of savoury and toasty as a champagne method sparkling.
Yeah. So I guess that's obviously why it's a bit more reasonably priced often.
Absolutely.
Is because it's not as like labor intensive.
Yeah.
But also again, not to say that it's not delicious.
Oh, totally.
And especially like on a hot, crisp and clean, like on a hot summer's day, that's just what you want. And definitely in your cocktails, your spritzes and things like that, you want something that's just a bit cleaner and going to allow the other flavors to come through as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now the other one, so I've got this little guy here, bit of a new kid on the block. What is a Pet Nat? And should I be worried that they're always like really cloudy and have bits in it?
That's a good question because I think that's something that is a bit of a barrier to a lot of people trying Pet Nat. The cloudiness is just because it's not filtered, but that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. And the little floaty bits is just because it's fermented in the bottle, sometimes little bits of lees and tartrates get stuck in there. So tartrates are like these little crystals. They're totally harmless to drink. We call them wine diamonds, which is kind of nice. And like the lees is fine too. It's not, some people use it for face masks and stuff. They think it's really good for you, but they're totally fine to drink. It's completely safe.
Yeah.
Pet Nat is PETILLANT NATUREL, or another name for it is Méthode Ancestrale. So it's a type of sparkling that was kind of discovered by accident. Well, in fact, actually all sparkling was discovered by accident.
What a happy accident.
I know, totally happy accident, right? Like the Benedictine monk Dom Perignon, who's a lot of people will know the brand Dom Perignon, is very famous. He actually accidentally got sparkling in his table wine from Champagne, and he was doing everything he could to get the bubbles out of it. So it's an accident, but Pet Nat, is a wine that it's not like champagne where it goes through 2 fermentations to get the bubbles. It just goes through 1 fermentation. So during the fermentation of the wine, when there's a certain level of sugar, the winemaker will put it into the bottle and then it will finish fermenting in the bottle, and the byproduct of the fermentation is the CO2 or the bubbles, so they get all trapped in the bottle. And that's why sometimes Pet Nat's a little bit sweeter than champagne, because it just kind of stops fermenting when it feels like it. It's not as controlled process, so sometimes Pet Nats might be a little bit sweeter than champagne.
Yeah. I find that most people, they're really concerned about their wine being dry. It's probably the number one question I get asked. Because I guess a lot of people have bad experiences of kind of really cheap Moscato and stuff when they're kids, and so they don't want that. Well, first of all, is there kind of an easy way of telling if you're in a bottle shop or something how sweet or dry something is going to be? And second of all, does sweetness always have to be bad? I feel it's obviously going to be each individual's perception, but sometimes I feel a bit bad for those wines that do have a bit of sweetness, but that's actually totally desired and right for that wine.
I think on the sweetness, it depends on the wine. So I think there is, like you said, there's a perception that dry is always the best, but with champagne in particular, it's grown in a very, very cool region, which means the wines have very, very high acidity.
Because this is delicious, but the acid is whoa.
But this has actually a bit of sugar added to the dosage, and I think even though it's quite acidic, it's quite balanced as well. And so that is a really good demonstration of how important it is to actually utilize a bit of sugar in champagne making.
Well, it's the same as cocktails. Sometimes I'll get someone be like, can I have a mojito with no sugar? And of course I'm sure, if that's actually what you want, but it's gonna not be a very, you need, I will promise I won't make it too sweet, but it needs to have a little bit of sugar in there. Otherwise it's just lime juice and rum, which is a pretty not particularly desirable combination.
Sucking on a lemon, isn't it? It's
exactly.
Not super delicious. So it's all about balance, really. And I think just like cocktail making and wine making, you're always looking for balance. So with champagne, because it's really high acid, ideally you're looking for something with a little bit of a dosage. Dosage just means that they add a little bit of sugar. But with things like Prosecco, you don't really need dosage because it's a lower acid variety.
Yeah.
And so therefore it's
quite
already...
often just has like a lot more like fruit
Exactly.
sweetness almost.
Yeah, totally. So that's kind of why sugar is not bad when it comes to sparkling. It just really depends on what type of sparkling it is.
Yeah.
In terms of like when you're in a bottle shop and you're trying to work out how to, what's dry, what's sweet, there's some on the back of the label. Often you'll be able to find, like this wine here, you probably won't be able to see it on the camera, but it says BRUT nature. So that when it says BRUT nature, what that means is there's been no sugar added at all. So this is a really bone dry sparkling. And
Cava's quite often a bit more savoury as well, actually, rather than like super fruity. So yeah.
So it can be kind of nice, like to have something like, and because it's not as high acid as champagne, like a bone dry cava can be quite balanced because it's not super acidic.
Yeah.
And then you've got something like this Loire Valley sparkling here, and on the back it says extra dry, but sometimes it might say extra brut. So that just means that it's got just a tiny bit of sugar added, just to balance it out a bit. And then some wines will say brut, which means that it's had a little bit more sugar added, but it's still dry, because brut means dry. And then you can find something that says demi-sec, which means that it's a bit of a sweeter sort of style of sparkling. So sometimes you'll find from the Loire Valley demi-sec sparklings, so they're a little bit semi-sweet, but they are starting to go out of fashion because now as these regions are warming up, their acid levels in the wines are dropping, so they don't need to really add so much sweetness. They're actually kind of a little bit out of balance when they have that sweetness in them.
Which is so interesting, like how climate change is actually just changing all of these traditions that we've had for so long in terms of farming, because I know like a lot of producers are, bigger producers are like buying vineyards in different countries and stuff now to try and get like a similar style of fruit than they used to be able to get on their own vineyards, but they just can't anymore because everything's getting hotter. It's pretty crazy.
It's wild. Like in Champagne now we're seeing more and more extra brut or brut nature, so low to no dosage or addition of sugar, because a lot of the areas of Champagne are getting so warm that they don't need to add sugar anymore because their acid levels are dropping, and they're buying vineyards in England.
In the UK, I know, it's pretty great. Maybe there'll be a Scottish wine at some point.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Other than Buckfast, which is an adopted Scottish wine. Now, one thing, I guess, in terms of that, just like working out what you like and what you don't, I tend to find that I like champagnes and Australian sparklings and things that say Blanc de Blanc on them. Why is that?
Okay, good question. Blanc de Blanc means that it's all white grapes. So in Champagne, that means that it could, there's 7 grape varieties, but it could be Pinot Blanc or Pinot Gris or Chardonnay, but most commonly it's Chardonnay.
Yeah. And I love a Chardonnay, so that
I love a good Chardonnay.
So it makes sense.
It does, yeah. So that's what Blanc de Blanc means. It's a white grape based, and so Blanc de Noir means it's a black grape based. So Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier are the 2 main varieties. So yeah, if you want some, Blanc de Blanc's a bit more minerally, a bit more acid driven, a bit more kind of citrusy sort of style, whereas a Blanc de Noir is a bit more of a fuller bodied, bigger style of sparkling.
Yeah, cool. I'm glad to get to the bottom of that. And I guess that kind of probably also leads into the next question, which is like when bubbles are pink, like when they're rosé, what is that? Because you can get white champagnes which are made from red grapes.
That's right.
Yeah, what's kind of the difference there when it's pink? Because pink bubbles are probably the superior bubbles.
Oh, 100%, like the most festive of all bubbles, I think. So when they're white, if it's made from black grapes, or red grapes, but it's a white wine. Yeah. It means that what they've done is that all the colour in wine comes from the skins, from the red skin. So if you've got a pink wine, it's made from red grapes and it's had a little bit of time of macerating of the juice with the skins, and that's where you get the colour from. But in sparkling, they can use red or black grapes to make white wine, and that means that it hasn't had any contact with the skin at all. So they just press it really quickly and it doesn't touch the skin.
Yeah, because all of the juice is white.
All the juice is white.
Because I guess if you eat a red grape, it's still white on the inside, which is something that you don't really think about. Yeah, cool. And then I guess just to finish off, for people that are at home or like even myself, sometimes when I go into a bottle shop that just has heaps and heaps of options, you know, what kind of questions would you think that you should ask the, or, you know, in a restaurant or whatever on a wine list? Like, how do you start to narrow it down? Do you have sort of a few questions that you ask people when they come into the shop or to a restaurant where you're serving, and sort of talk to help them, just decide what's going to be right for them?
Yeah. I mean, I think in a bottle shop setting, it's thinking about, you know, do you want something that's fruity or do you want something that's savoury? If you want something fruity, I'd suggest go for a Prosecco or a Pet Nat. But if you want something a bit more savoury and complex, go for a champagne method sparkling. But it doesn't necessarily have to be champagne if you don't really want to spend that much money.
Because unfortunately, as much as, you know, we deserve to drink champagne every day, it just doesn't always happen that way. Do you think that's kind of different in a restaurant setting, or was that sort of the same questions that you'd be asking?
I think so, yeah. Just think about, you know, what sort of style of wine you're looking for. If you want something that's just a bit more fun, a bit more fruity and festive, just let the bartender or the sommelier know. And it's always good to give them a bit of an idea about what your budget is, because then they can steer you in the right direction as well.
Yeah, I feel like that's always a hard one when you ask someone for a recommendation and they either go wildly out of your budget or sort of even like a bit lower than what you were thinking because it is a special occasion or something. So I think giving like a price bracket is always a good one, and basically can determine whether or not you are going to be like champagne or something's in that similar style. But you know, there's so many awesome Aussie ones that are really quite good value for money, and I'm sure the same would be true in the States. Absolutely. In the wine producing regions and things there. Yeah. Plenty of bargains to be had.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Brodie. So hopefully that's kind of cleared up some questions in the ever-changing world of sparkling. But obviously, if you did have any other questions, then I'm sure if you drop them in the comments that I can get our resident expert here to clear anything up that we didn't cover. And I think it's about time that we started making some cocktails now that we've had our initial glass of champagne. So make sure that you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on that episode when it comes out. Thanks.
Cheers.